So what are PEOs?
So PEO stands for Professional Employer Organization. They're essentially a third party that helps in some way with the governance over a company's employees. Some take a larger role in that process, some take a smaller, more defined role. It's really going to depend on the type of PEO, whether they're truly a PEO or maybe like a staffing agency, which just places an employee with your organization.
You said governance over, and help me understand that better.
Yeah, so certain PEOs or certain third party, I'll just put staffing companies, may maintain control over the employees during the employment arrangement. They're doing all of the necessary protocols to legally employ somebody, including all the onboarding, payment to the worker, any workers' comp issue, possibly unemployment if the employee leaves. And they're, for all practical purposes, the employer of record, even though this company is technically directing the worker to some degree, and the worker is on the company's work site, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So they sort of become the proxy employer that handles all the regulatory stuff. Okay.
Yeah, and there's
All
varying
right.
degrees. There's some that do as little as payroll. There's others that do as much as everything I just mentioned. So it really is going to depend on the organization.
Okay. I find it this fascinating that this industry has kind of grown up, right? Like, how do you like how would a company know when they might be a good candidate for using a PEO?
So certainly, if a company's getting to a point where, they're bringing on more and more employees, maybe the administrative burden is becoming too much in terms of the handling of all the day-to-day issues with the employees, and they'd like to bring in a third party to help with some or all of that governance over the employee relationship. That would be a great time to begin to explore, what is a PEO? What is a good one that fits, for my organization? Because there's no one size fits all PEO for every company. And maybe talking to a PEO broker, believe it or not, those
Oh wow,
exist.
they're PEO brokers. I didn't. Okay.
Yeah, I actually have some in my network. So if you're watching this video and you're interested in talking to a PEO broker, definitely send me a message. I'd be happy to make an introduction.
Okay. That's fascinating.
Well, I was going to turn it to you. If a company engages a PEO or a staffing agency or any third party to just help with that employment relationship, as I just talked about, are there any implications in the IP world?
Yeah, and this is kind of a so you do one thing you've got to be cognizant of, and it's not for all companies, but companies that are like I represent predominantly like technology companies and creatives who are generating intellectual property. And so when you're using a PEO, one of the things you got to think about is the default rules for employment, you know, give certain advantages to the employer. But when you're using a PEO, all of a sudden you've inserted a third party into that employer role, or at least partially into that role. You really have to think about how's this triangle working, right? And making sure that the IP that's being developed is getting to the right place. So it does take an extra step to just make sure that it's set up properly.
And when's a good time for a company to talk to someone like yourself when they're beginning to enter the realm of engaging a PEO, or let's say they've had a PEO for a while? When's the right time to talk to you?
It'll be before you actually engage the PEO because it's partly embedded in the documents with the PEO. If it's a temp agency and they're not really the employer of record, I think those are the words you said, then it may be different. But if it's something where they are for legal purposes the employer, then you're going to have to work out something directly with this employee and with the PEO just to make sure everything goes in the right place. This is not going to be a surprise to PEOs. PEOs are familiar with this. Anybody who's in this, and if they're not, then that might be a red flag. But PEOs should be familiar with this issue.
Yeah, so the takeaway is talk to your IP attorney, talk to your employment law attorney before you begin to engage a PEO, because there's a number of legal implications involved.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks, Justin.